For 31 years, the lighthouse on Calder's Point had answered every night the same way, with light. And for the past 4 summers, so had the window of the old gray-shingled house just down the bluff, the one with the blue door and the widow's walk where Margaret Hale sometimes stood at dusk, watching the water turn to pewter. The light in that window was not a lighthouse beam. It was a lamp, a small one, amber-shaded, set just inside the glass so it could be seen from across the scrubgrass lot that separated her house from his every evening. Whichever of them was still all right, still here, still breathing and whole, would set that lamp burning, and the other would answer, and neither of them had ever once spoken of what it meant. Welcome to the Lamplit Hour, where every story is a small light left on for someone who needs it. If stories like this bring you comfort, take a moment to subscribe and stay a while. The town of Calder's Point, Maine, sits on a thumb of granite that juts into the Atlantic like a dare. It is not the kind of place that invites strangers to linger. The winters are long and honest. The fog rolls in without ceremony, and the sea makes its opinions known through a language of stone and tide that takes decades to learn. But those who stay, who can commit to its salt gray silences and its sudden violent sunsets, tend to stay forever. They sink their roots right through the granite somehow and hold. Walter Oakes had arrived in Calder's Point as a young man of 26, fresh from the coast of North Carolina, with a handshake job offer to assist the head keeper of the lighthouse and a duffel bag that held everything he owned. He hadn't intended to stay past a season. That was in 1969. He married a local woman named Ruth Connolly, who taught 2nd grade and made an extraordinary blueberry pie and laughed at things that other people didn't find funny, which Walter found to be among the most beautiful qualities a person could possess. They had 2 children, both of whom had eventually migrated south and west, as children do, following the gravitational pull of careers and spouses and lives that needed to be built from scratch. Walter and Ruth had watched them go with the specific bittersweet pride of people who had done their job too well. He kept his post at the lighthouse until the Coast Guard automated the light in 1992, and then he did what many retired keepers do. He simply stayed. He fixed engines for the lobstermen, served on the town select board, and learned, late in life, to paint in watercolors, mostly seascapes, mostly not very good ones, though Ruth always said otherwise. She framed 3 of them and hung them in the kitchen, which he considered an act of love so extravagant it brought him close to tears every time he stood beneath them with his morning coffee. Ruth died in the spring of 2019, a Tuesday in late April, when the forsythia had just come out along the fence. She had been sick for 8 months, and they had known, and they had said everything that needed saying, which is something not everyone gets to do, and which Walter understood was a profound and quiet mercy. Still, the house after her was a different kind of house. The same rooms, the same windows, the same kitchen with the watercolors on the wall, but all of it somehow revised, all of it read differently without her moving through it. Margaret Hale had lived next door for 22 of those years. She had come to Calder's Point with her husband, David, who had been a marine biologist at the university in Orono, and to spend his weekends cataloging tide pool ecosystems with the systematic devotion of a man who believed the most important things were the ones most people walked past without looking. David had been kind and slightly distracted and deeply good, and Margaret had loved him the way you love someone who makes the world seem more interesting than it was before you met them. He died of a cardiac event in 2018, 11 months before Ruth, shoveling the last of a February snowstorm from their front walk. He was 68 years old. He had seemed until that moment as permanent as anything she knew. Margaret was a retired librarian. 30 years at the Calders Point Public Library, where she had known every regular patron by name and by reading habit. She knew who was going through a hard time by what they checked out, who was newly in love, who was grieving, who needed the large print editions and was too proud to say so. A library, she had always believed, was a town's interior life. It was where the private self went when the public self needed a rest. She had never once betrayed that trust. Now she was 69 and living alone, and her interior life had contracted somewhat, as interior lives tend to do when the person who most knew how to populate them is gone. She still walked the beach path each morning. She kept a vegetable garden too large for one person and left bags of tomatoes on neighbors' porches silently, like a liturgy. She had recently taken up bird watching with a seriousness that surprised her. The discipline of attention, the patience, the reward when it came, a flash of wing among the alders, a name suddenly known. She thought David would have approved. Walter Oakes was 77. He walked with a hitch in his right knee from an old injury, a dock, a sudden wave, a miscalculation that Ruth had teased him about for 40 years. His hair had gone fully white and had the texture of seagrass. He wore the same clothes he always had, canvas pants, flannel shirts, boots that needed resoling. And he had the quality that some old keepers develop, a quality of absolute stillness that suggested he had made his peace with waiting. The sea teaches that. You stand watch long enough, and you learn that most of what you do is watch, and most of what you watch is time passing, and this is not nothing. It is, in fact, quite a lot. He and Margaret had been friendly neighbors for decades, but the real closeness, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that simply arrives and makes itself at home, had come in the year after their spouses died. There is a particular fellowship among the newly bereaved, especially when they live next to each other and can see across a scrub grass lot the light going on in the morning and off at night. They had coffee together twice that first winter, and it was painful and comforting in equal measure. Two people learning, clumsily, to stand without their counterbalance. Walter helped when her furnace made a sound it shouldn't. She brought soup when he had a February chest cold, chicken and orzo from a recipe she'd made for 30 years, and he said it was the best soup he'd ever eaten, which she suspected was not entirely true, but which moved her nonetheless. It was the following summer that the lamp ritual began, though neither of them would have called it that. It had no ceremony to it, no pact, no spoken agreement. It grew the way things grow in New England, slowly, without announcing itself, from soil that had been quietly prepared. Walter had been having a bad week in the July of 2020. Nothing dramatic, just the accumulation of small difficulties that grief brings in its second year, when the world expects you to be done with it, and you discover, with some private shame, that you are not. He hadn't been sleeping. He had stood at a seaward window 3 nights running, watching the old light sweep across the water from the lighthouse at the point, and feeling the specific desolation of being awake at 2 in the morning in a house built for 2 people. On the 4th night, sometime around 9, Margaret's kitchen light had been on. He could see it from his chair. And it had occurred to him, in the irrational way that thoughts come in grief, that the mere fact of her light being on meant that she was all right, and that the world had not contracted further, and that this was a comfort he had not known he needed until the very moment he felt it. He didn't know until she told him 2 summers later that she had been watching his window for the same reason, counting the lit squares of his house the way she had once counted the lit rooms of her own when David was out late, not obsessively, just as a habit of love, the way you check without quite meaning to, because a person exists in your orbit and their light or absence of light is information about the world. He had set the lamp in the window first. He hadn't thought much about it. He simply moved the amber lamp from the side table to the windowsill and turned it on, and the warm square of it appeared among the dark panes and faced the sea. An hour later, a lamp appeared in her window, not her kitchen light. A different light, smaller, also amber, set in the same seaward-facing window position. He had looked at it for a long time. He had not said anything to her about it the next morning when they crossed paths near the mailboxes. Neither had she, but the following evening he put the lamp in the window again, and she answered again, and the exchange was complete. By the second summer, it was simply part of how they lived. There was nothing conscious about it anymore. Dusk came, and you lit your lamp, and you looked across, and you waited, and presently the other lamp came on, and something in the chest settled. Not quite relief, not quite happiness, but the specific comfort of confirmation. You were both still here. Another day had passed, and you had both navigated it. The Atlantic rolled on in its ancient, indifferent way, and the lighthouse swept its long, white arm across the dark, and 2 small amber lights on a scrub-grass bluff told each other what no other language seemed adequate to say. They still had coffee together occasionally. They still had the occasional evening on one or the other's porch, watching the tide, talking the way people talk when they've known each other long enough to follow each other's ellipses. They talked about their children, Margaret's daughter Ellen in Portland, Walter's son James in Phoenix, and about books. Margaret had been slowly introducing Walter to fiction, which he'd neglected in favor of history and maritime nonfiction for most of his life. He worked through her reading list with the methodical pleasure of a man accustomed to logs and charts, and he told her one August evening, with the sea going gold below the bluff, that he thought Anna Karenina was too long, but that the dog was the best character. She laughed in the particular way she laughed when something genuinely delighted her, a sound that seemed to start somewhere in the middle of her and work its way up. And he had thought that he had not heard anything so purely pleasant in a very long time. Neither of them spoke of the lamps. This was in some way what gave the ritual its power. To name it would have been to make it into something negotiated, something with terms and expectations and the vulnerability of explicit want. This way, it was simply something they did. It existed in the same register as weather, undeniable, present, requiring no explanation. They were both too old and had both survived too much to risk disturbing what worked by examining it too closely. They left it alone, the way you leave a bird at the feeder alone, staying very still, hardly breathing, so as not to frighten it off. Summer came again, the summer of 2023, the 4th since the ritual had taken root. It was a good summer for the coast, warm but not brutal, the fog burning off most mornings by 10, the sea running blue and clean. The lupines in Margaret's garden, which she'd let go wild along the fence, had been extraordinary in June, and she'd photographed them with her phone and sent the picture to Ellen, who had called to say they looked like something out of a painting, and Margaret had felt the particular pleasure of sharing a beautiful thing. Walter had stared at a new watercolor. The lighthouse again, always the lighthouse, though each version was slightly different, slightly closer to something he was trying to get at that he couldn't quite name. He had seemed fine. He had been walking on the beach path. She'd seen him most mornings, his white hair visible from her garden if she looked up from the tomatoes at the right time. They had shared a meal on his porch in mid-July, roasted chicken that she'd made, and a bottle of white wine that he'd produced from somewhere. And they had sat out until the mosquitoes drove them in, talking about nothing in particular and about everything in the way that old friends do, skipping across subjects the way a stone skips water, the lightness of the movement concealing how much ground is covered. If this story is staying with you, a quiet light helps me keep the lamp lit for others. The evening of the 4th of August was a Monday. It had been a clear day, the kind that Cape and coastal New England sometimes produces in high summer, when the air has a particular crystalline quality and the shadows are sharp-edged and the light on the water is so bright it seems almost aggressive in its beauty. Margaret had spent the afternoon deadheading the garden and then reading in her chair near the window. She was working through a novel Ellen had sent, something contemporary that she was enjoying more than she'd expected. She ate dinner at 6:30, as she usually did. She did the dishes. She made a cup of chamomile tea. At dusk, she set her lamp in the window. This was as automatic as breathing. She watched his window the way she always watched it, not staring, not standing sentinel, just holding it in the edge of her attention while she moved around the room and settled into the evening. The light faded. The first stars appeared. The lighthouse at the point sent its slow arm of white light across the dark water, once, twice, steady as a heartbeat. His lamp did not come on. She told herself it was nothing. He had simply gone to bed early or stepped out. His son James had mentioned, the last time they'd spoken at the mailboxes, that he might come east for a visit, and perhaps Walter had gone to dinner somewhere or driven down to Rockport to the fish place he liked. Any number of things. She was reading too much into it, the way anxious people read into silences, but she was not at her core an anxious person. She was a librarian. She had learned to read meaning in what was absent as carefully as in what was present. And in 4 years of this ritual, 1,400 evenings, give or take, his lamp had never failed to answer hers. By 9 o'clock, the darkness was complete and his window was dark. She stood at her own window for a long time. She watched his house the way you watch a face for some sign of what is happening beneath it. The house told her nothing. The windows were dark. The blue pickup truck he rarely drove anymore was in the driveway, which meant he hadn't gone anywhere. A light was on, she thought. A faint light, deeper inside the house. Possibly the hallway light, possibly the television. She couldn't be certain. 4 years, 1,400 evenings, 2 lamps, answering each other across the dark. She put down her book. She had not been inside his house in 5 months, since a February afternoon when she brought over the soup again. It had become a kind of annual offering, the chicken and orzo, a way of marking the cold season together without quite saying that was what it was. She had been inside his house perhaps a dozen times in all the years of their knowing each other, which was a strange thing to realize. They had been so intimate in some ways and so careful in others, as if proximity required distance as its counterweight, as if you could be very close to someone and still maintain the courteous fiction that you were simply neighbors who got along well. She crossed the lot in the dark. The scrub grass was dry under her shoes. The late summer grass of coastal Maine that somehow persists through everything. Salt spray and nor'easters and the long, slow freeze of winter. The air smelled of the sea and of the rosa rugosa that grew along the fence between the properties, the old beach roses that had been there longer than either of them. She walked up the 3 porch steps and knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, louder. A sound, movement, slow and careful, from somewhere inside the house. Then the porch light came on and the door opened, and there was Walter. He was in his pajamas, which she had never seen before. The blue and white striped kind, very old, soft, from decades of washing. He was holding the door frame with one hand, and she could see immediately that something was wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, not the thing she'd been quietly afraid of since the moment his lamp failed to come on, but wrong in the particular way of a body that has been betrayed by its own systems without warning. He was pale in the porch light. His eyes, when he looked at her, held the specific expression of a man who has been caught in vulnerability and doesn't quite know how to manage it. "Margaret," he said. "Walter," she said. "What happened?" It was not quite a question. It was what you said when you already knew in some essential way the shape of things. He'd had a fall. That afternoon, around 3, he thought, the old dock and Waveney had buckled going into the kitchen, and he'd gone down hard against the counter and then to the floor. He lay there for 15 or 20 minutes, taking stock, making sure nothing was broken, which it wasn't. He got himself up by degrees, counter, step stool, upright and slow and sore, but upright. He had felt shaky and somewhat diminished in the way that falls diminish the old, not because of the injury, but because of what they suggest about the future. He sat in his armchair through the afternoon and into the evening and fell asleep. And when he woke, it was full dark, and he could see from where he sat that her lamp was in her window, that amber light like a small sun, and his window dark across from it. He had tried to get up then, had intended to light the lamp, but the knee had stiffened in sleep and he had sat back down. He sat there in the dark with her light visible through the glass and felt something that was not quite shame but was adjacent to it. The old careful pride of a man who has always managed his own affairs and has not required anyone to manage them for him. He told her all of this in the doorway, in a voice that was measured and very quiet, and that carried beneath it, if you were listening, the sound of a person telling the truth in a way they didn't entirely mean to. The porch light was yellow, and it made everything look a little warmer than it was. When he was done, she said, "May I come in?" He stepped back from the door. The house smelled like Walter, like old wood and linseed oil, and very faintly of coffee, and like the particular clean scent of a house that a person has inhabited so long it has taken on their character. She had always liked this house. Even in the few times she'd been inside it, she'd felt the accumulated life of it, all the decades of Walter and Ruth and their children, and their arguments and their laughter, and their long, quiet evenings. The watercolors were still in the kitchen. She could see 2 of them from where she stood in the hall. She helped him to the armchair. She made him tea and found the ibuprofen in the bathroom cabinet. She assessed the knee with the calm practicality of someone who had raised children and knew the difference between the dramatic and the serious, and she concluded that it was bruised and stiff and would bear weight again in a day or two, and that what he needed was rest and ice and company in that order. She found a bag of frozen peas in the freezer, which is what there always is, and she wrapped it in a dish towel and pressed it to his knee, and he made the face that men make when they are being tended to and are trying not to show how much they need it. They sat in the low light of the front room for a while. She had brought her tea to the chair opposite his. The television was off. The window was dark, both windows, hers and his, and the only light came from the lamp she had turned on when she came in, not the window lamp, but the one on the side table, which cast the room in the same amber she knew from across the lot. Outside, the lighthouse turned. She said after a while, "I've been watching your window for 4 years." He said, "I know." She said, "Every night?" He said, "So have I." There was a silence that was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who have just confirmed something that had been true for a long time, and that they had agreed in some unspoken way not to examine. But they were examining it now, and it turned out not to be fragile. It turned out to be solid, the way things are solid when they've been put under sufficient pressure and haven't broken. "When your lamp didn't come on," she said, "I sat by my window for 3 hours." He looked at her. "I was afraid," she said. She said it simply, without apology, in the way she had always been able to say true things, which was a gift, and not everyone had it. "Not just afraid. I don't have a good word for what I was. Something bigger than afraid." "Margaret," he said, and his voice had changed, was quieter, rougher around the edges in the way voices get when something in the person has shifted. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "No," he said. "I think I do. I think I've owed you something for—" He stopped and started again. "The lamps," he said. "I started it for myself. That first summer, after Ruth, I wasn't sleeping. I'd sit by the window, and I'd see her kitchen light, and I'd think, well, she's still there. The world still has her in it. And then I put the lamp out because I wanted you to know the same thing, that I was still there." He paused. "And then you answered." "And then I answered," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "It became the best part of my day," he said. "For 4 years, every evening when that lamp came on, yours coming on or mine, and then waiting for yours, it was the best part of my day." She had known this, she thought. She had known it the way you know things you were not quite ready to know, holding them at the edge of awareness, keeping them in your peripheral vision so they don't resolve into something that requires you to act on them. "I didn't want to disturb it," she said. "No," he agreed. "Neither did I. We were both afraid of disturbing it." "Yes." Outside, the sea moved in its slow old way against the granite shore, and the lighthouse sent its patient signal into the dark, and the rosa rugosa along the fence gave its late summer scent to the night air, and the front room of Walter Oakes's house held 2 people who had been neighbors for 22 years and friends for 4, and who were, it turned out, something else as well, had been something else for some time, without the proper name for it, the name having been held in reserve against the possibility of needing it someday. "I'm glad you came over," he said. "I almost didn't," she said. 4 years of not crossing this lot, and I nearly didn't cross it tonight." What changed your mind? She thought about it. 3 hours, she said. 3 hours by the window, waiting for your lamp. And at some point, I realized that whether or not your lamp ever came on again, whether the news was good or bad, I couldn't be the person who sat by her window and did nothing. I couldn't be that person. She looked at him. Not for you. He reached across the space between the chairs and put his hand over hers, which was on the arm of the chair. His hand was large and scarred in the way of men who have worked with rope and machinery and cold water for 50 years. It was very warm. You lit both lamps tonight, he said. She looked at him. I could see them from here, he said. When you came across, your lamp was still in your window, and then the light came on in here. I could see them both from this chair, both lamps. She hadn't thought of it that way. She had simply turned on a lamp when she came in, the way you do. But she saw now what it had looked like from where he was sitting. 2 amber lights, hers and his, both burning at once for the first time. That's what I want, he said, and his voice was very quiet. For whatever time we have, both lamps. I don't need it to have a name. I just need both lamps. She turned her hand over under his. Both lamps, she said. The night settled around them. She stayed. She had not planned to, but the evening made its own arrangements, and neither of them mentioned the time. She made them more tea, found crackers and cheese in the kitchen, and they ate without ceremony, like people who were simply in the same room and not performing anything. He told her about the new watercolor, the lighthouse again, and she asked to see it. He held it up in the lamplight, and it was better than he thought it was. She had always suspected this about his painting, that he couldn't see it clearly because he was too close to it. She told him so, and he looked at the painting and then at her with an expression containing several things at once: pleasure and sheepishness and something that was almost wonder. Ruth said the same thing, he said. Ruth was right, said Margaret. He put the painting down. She usually was, he said. They sat for another hour. At some point, without discussion, she moved to the sofa that was closer to his chair, close enough that the amber lamplight covered them both equally, and they talked in the unhurried way of people who have stopped performing relaxation and arrived at the actual thing. They talked about their children and what it was to love them from a distance. They talked about the town, the lobstermen, the summer people, the way Calder's Point had changed and the way it hadn't. He told her a story about the lighthouse in a winter storm in 1987 that she had never heard before. And she told him about a patron at the library, years ago now, who had checked out the same book 47 times and never spoken about it, and whom she had never asked, because some things you simply hold and trust. Before she left, she checked the knee again, still swollen, but he had feeling and movement in it, and the color was normal. She told him he needed to call his doctor in the morning, and he said he would, and she said she meant it, and he said he knew. She said she would check on him in the morning. He said he'd like that. She put the frozen peas back in the freezer and rinsed the cups and stood for a moment in the kitchen with the watercolors on the wall. 3 of them, Ruth's 3, the ones that had hung there since Ruth hung them. And she felt the presence of all the years in this house, all the living that had happened in these rooms, and she felt that it was good, that it was right, that it held. At the door, she paused. I'll light mine when I get back, she said, so you know I made it across. Something in his face, a slight shift, the relaxation of some muscle that had been held. I'll watch for it," he said. She went down the porch steps and across the scrub grass lot in the dark, through the night air that smelled of salt and roses, and she went inside her blue-doored house. And she crossed the room, and she turned the lamp in the seaward window so it faced out, fully out, toward his house and the sea beyond. A moment passed. 2. The night was very quiet. Then his lamp came on. It was amber like hers, small like hers. It sat in the window of the old gray-shingled house, and it faced the sea, and the 2 lights were reflected faintly in the window glass, hers and his, side by side in the dark, and beyond them the lighthouse at the point sent its slow arm of white light across the water, steady as it had always been, steady as it would be long after both of them were gone. But for now, on this August night, both lamps burned. She stood at her window for a while, not moving, watching the light in his window and the light in hers. She thought about Ruth, who had hung the watercolors. She thought about David, who had cataloged the tide pools and found everything important. She thought about the years of living next door to someone, not the closeness of family, which is built into you, but the chosen closeness of proximity and time and shared weather, the 1,000 small confirmations of another person's presence in your orbit. She thought, this is not the story I expected to be living at 69, and then, but it is the one I have, and it is good, and I will tend it. She left both lamps on longer than usual that night. Outside, the sea breathed against the rock. The fog was beginning to come in off the water. She could see it at the edge of the light, that soft gray advance that turned the world gentle and close. By morning, the bluff would be wrapped in it, the lighthouse barely visible, the whole coast made private and quiet, but the lamps would still be burning. She was fairly sure of that. In the weeks that followed, the ritual changed and deepened, the way rituals do when the things they represent are finally allowed to be named. He came to her porch in the evenings now, when his knee had healed and the late summer air was still warm enough to sit outside. She drove him to his doctor's appointment and sat in the waiting room with her novel, and he was fine. A bruised kneecap, nothing fractured, a prescription for rest and patience that he was characteristically inclined to ignore, and that she was characteristically inclined to monitor. He did not resent this. He had not known until now how much he had missed being tended to by someone who meant it. By September, the Rosa rugosa along the fence had gone to hips, fat and orange-red, and the garden was done for the year. One evening they stood at the edge of the driveway in the early season dusk, watching a gull work the updraft off the bluff, and Walter put his hand briefly at the small of her back as they turned toward the houses. It was a light touch, barely there, the gesture of a man who has learned to offer things without requiring their acceptance. She leaned into it slightly as they walked, just slightly. It was enough. That night the lamps came on at dusk, as they always did, as they would. Hers first, and then his. Amber in the blue-gray September dark, answering each other across the scrub grass lot, the way they had on 1,400 evenings, and would on however many evenings remained. The lighthouse swept its long white arm, and the sea went about its ancient, indifferent, essential business. And on the bluff, above Calder's Point, 2 small lights burned side by side in seaward windows, not naming themselves, not needing to, keeping their old faithful promise to each other in the only language they had ever needed, which was, I am here, which was, so am I, which was everything. There is something we sometimes forget about love in the second half of life. We imagine it must look like what it looked like in the first, urgent, declarative, arriving with a noise. But often it is not. Often it is very quiet. Often it grows in the space between two people who have already survived their share of loss and who have learned through that survival to be grateful for small confirmations. A lamp in a window, a hand over yours, someone still there when you check. Walter and Margaret would not have called what grew between them extraordinary. They were not the kind of people who used that word easily. But they would have said, each of them, if you had asked, that the evenings were better, that the world felt less contracted, that some essential window of the interior, the one that had gone dark when their spouses died, had been quietly relit, and that the light it gave was warm and steady, and in all the ways that mattered, enough. Two lamps in a dark window above a sea that has been here longer than any of us, both burning still. Thank you for spending this hour with me. If you'd like more stories like this one, subscribe, and I'll leave the light on for you next time. Rest well.